Coverage from BevCom has been brought to you by Rive. More on them later. Let's talk about publishing. It's probably going to be the main topic that we had here for our studio at Gamescom. The thing that I really want, or Gamescom and DevCom, I guess, the thing that I really wanted to learn more about. And I have learned a lot today, and that's kind of what I want to talk to you about now. I've been able to talk to various publishers, Team 17, PlayStack, some consultants to publishing and things like that, to ask them, like, what the hell is going on? How am I going to get my game published, if ever? Because if you don't know, for Gamescom, so not DevCom but Gamescom, we will be pitching Guild Architect, one of our games that we're working on right now, and my hopes are pretty low. I think that's maybe not the best mindset to go in with, that defeatist mindset, but we have to face the facts. There was this beautiful stat that I saw earlier today that made me want to cry, where for like every 1,000 pitches basically, only like 1.6 or something actually gets approved. That's like almost 0.1% of pitches get accepted. And don't get me wrong, publishing used to be hard always. Like, generally, it used to be like 1% of all pitches get published at the end of the day, which still seems very insurmountable. But at the end of the day, that's like still, you know, it's not horrible. It's like, hey, if I do 100 pitches, I'll get there eventually. Now it feels like with all of the news about the layoffs, we had a meeting planned with Humble Games, for example, and Humble Games doesn't exist anymore. So in this video, I'll talk a little bit more about a few things. First of all, well, I'm not going to talk about what is a publisher. If you don't know that yet, basically they give you money to make your game. Second of all, what are the things publishers are looking for in games, and how can I, as a developer, bring that to the table? And I think this is a very difficult question, and no real single solid concrete answer for this exists. But I think I have some good ideas. And the third thing is, how should I plan for going for publishing? Because there are some sad things there as well. And the first thing is being aware that, hey, if you somehow were under a rock, game publishing has changed a lot in the last mainly last 2 years, really, because you need to understand, why was this drop there? Well, with COVID, everyone was pumping money into games, because games, they were being played non-stop because everyone was stuck at home. But games take a lot of time to make, so investments made in 2020 were starting to release in 2022, investments made in 2021 came out in 2023. The problem is 2023 then came around and suddenly nobody was buying games anymore. Take that into account with also an inflation, recession, all of that, like people weren't spending as much money anymore. So you end up with a lot of games that have hundreds of thousands, like $500,000, $1 million plus put into it, barely like getting 100K, 200K, which means the publishers lose a lot of money. A good example for this is TinyBuild, whose stock prices have just been dramatically dropping, and they had to fire a lot of people. Humble Games fired people. Like I said, their entire publishing division shut down overnight, basically. And it's not great. But what are the things that publishers are funding when they are still funding games? Because that's what we want to know. Like, we don't want to know about how sad the industry is. You want to know, how do I get my own game published? And the answer to this is relatively easy, but also it's like, basically it boils down to just make a good game, bro. And this is the dumbest answer. I know you're gonna hate me now, but that's basically what the publishers are saying now. So, or just make a good game and we'll fund it. And it's like, yeah, that's not how it works. So what makes a good game? What are they looking for? They're looking for games with high, not per se replayability of like I can play it for 100 hours, but more of, hey, I want replayability in terms of I play this once and then I want to do it back. Even if it's just a demo, like the demos you send to publishers, they should already be highly replayable. The publishers enjoy the game and they feel like, hey, there is potential here, because if we want to keep playing it, our audience as well. It doesn't need to be a 20-hour long game, and don't pride yourself on the fact that your game is long, but just have it be something that people like. Another thing to keep in mind is, how do publishers work? This was a great talk I had from Team 17, is that, let's say for every 10 games, this is kind of made up, but this is the general idea, is for every 10 games, they'll have 5 games that are like surefire bets. So those are like, you know, your Steam games that you know are going to do good. They're like sim games, the things that Playway is publishing, basically. And then you also have, like, let's say they invest in out of those 10 games they fund, 5 of those are like the safe bets. And then they take 5 more risks, and like they look there for breakout successes where, hey, this could not go anywhere, or we could get something like Balatro, where it's suddenly like $20 million plus, which, hey, PlayStack had a big W on that one. But that is something that, you know, isn't always as easy for you. The problem is as well that safe approach is kind of the boring approach, because, you know, what was the recent one? I think it's like crime scene cleaning just came out, and it's like, yeah, it takes that same formula, but it's like, it's just a new setting, but there's nothing always too crazy about it, but it sells. Those are the safe approaches. But that's not what a lot of gamers want. You're probably making some crazy games. And for those ideas to get funded, basically, you need to be one of those people they take risks on. But right now, publishers don't want to take that many risks. Anyways, what does this all boil down to? They want, by general, however much money you're asking for. There's no like too low, or there's a too low number. Don't go for less than, I would say, 50, 75, even 100K. If you ask for less, it's often not worth it for the publisher to put in the time and the effort to go through all of the vetting, to go through all of it. You're looking at 100, 150K minimum for your funding, going all the way up to $500,000 is what I would say. There used to be a time where it used to be more, but right now it's $500,000. I think is the most you could reasonably ask. And if you're doing that, you need to be able to basically guarantee to the publisher that you're going to get a 3 times return on investment. So if you have a game you ask $500,000 for, you in their pitch, or like when you're pitching the game to them already, you need to be like, hey, these are all the games I believe this game can make $1.5 million, because then it starts to get worthwhile for the investor or for the publisher if they can get more than 3x their initial investment. And you're gonna sound like, hey, this is dumb, this is too much, like what the hell? But this is just the reality right now, so don't get mad. Another thing as well is that they're not just looking for games that have guaranteed returns on investments. This is the very common one you hear. Basically, publishers want finished games when you pitch them. Okay, they don't want fully finished games, but I think honestly, if you gave them a fully finished game, they would still say. They're like, yeah, we wouldn't do it because we need to add our marketing stuff. I think that's bullshit. Gonna be honest. If you give them a fully finished game, like 2 weeks for this, hey, you want to jump on the ship, give us some money right now and we can make this work, then I think every publisher would take the deal. It's free money at the end of the day. The thing is, on that opposite side of the spectrum, there was this period, 2017, like 2020, like I said, you have a pitch deck, you have a meeting, and you have a game design document. And that's it. Bam, you've gotten 100K, 6 figures, here, buy my course. That is gone. It sucks, but it's gone. So what do they look for then? Well, they look for a variety of other things. And the main takeaway that I got was that they were looking for evidence that game was going to be successful. Like, how do you get that 1.5 million? Because it's not just showing like, hey, this is how my game looks right now and it's beautiful and all of that. That's what the traditional approach was. You go to a publisher, and if you were too early, the game didn't look good enough yet, they're like, hey, come back later. The comeback later, by the way, always ask what they want exactly. Don't just be like, oh, we'll just pitch again in 3 months and keep working. Don't do that. Ask the publisher what they're looking for, like back them into a corner, but ask them nicely, basically, and see how would they respond. Do they want more visuals? Do they want more gameplay? Do they want more wish lists or whatever? There are other ways, however, that you can also convince publisher, and this is something that I always tell you guys, but you never listen, or at least there are like comments of people who don't listen. It's like, oh yeah, I shouldn't get my Steam page up because it's part of the publisher. Like, the publisher does the marketing, they want that like magic sauce basically of announcing the game and doing all of that, like launch and reveal and things like that. If that is the mindset you have, I can guarantee you are not getting published right now, because you need to keep in mind, maybe that's what you think. There are other developers out there who do know the reality of the current game they've seen. And what they do is they have that Steam page up, they start gathering wish lists already, and then they step to a publisher when they have 10K wish lists or whatever. And they're like, hey, look, we've validated this for you. We've got the game. We've got like some people who did the playtest. We've got the Discord server with people in it who are interested in the game and who have been playing it. We're looking now for more funding. Those developers have infinitely more chance of being funded than you, even if they had a objectively worse idea than whatever cool thing it is that you're thinking about. So basically, every publisher that I've talked to now is get a Steam page up, do your own marketing first, and I think this ties very well into the next point I want to talk about, and that is that I think in the current economy, and it's not just me, this was Jason Della Rocca did a talk about this, assume you're going to have to self-publish your game. The moment you start development, immediately assume we're never getting funding for this. No way. We have to do all of the marketing ourselves. We have to do everything ourselves. We have to find funding for that initial prototype, for everything. Assume the worst. Assume that you're going to have to do everything. And once you have reached that stage in like end of pre-production, early production, where you do have that playable build, for example, and you can start gathering wishes, you can start marketing, like immediately do things like starting tweeting about the prototype for the game that you're making or whatever. Build that up, because that is going to be what a publisher wants, and that is also going to be what they're looking for. That's that evidence I'm talking about. It's not just having a game that like is a good game. It's also showing that people will buy it. If you have 10,000 wish lists, you show to the publisher, people will buy this. And then the publisher can basically calculate, hey, okay, I just need to get more wish lists, which sure, they can do marketing probably, depends on the publisher, and then we'll get guaranteed money. Now, do remember that, hey, wish lists are not 100% a good indication of how many sales you're gonna get. Skim was a very good example of this, that released with 230K wish list, but as like less than 100 reviews, I think, last time I checked, which it's kind of sad, and the Playism definitely didn't get their cut on that one, I think. So there is still always going to be some risk. I think those things are very important. Showcasing also that you've released games before is a very important one. That is also another way of evidence. If you're a brand new team and things like that, it's going to be harder. But okay, so quick recap. You're making a game and you're getting good feedback from playtesters. You need to have playtesters basically, and they keep playing the game. You have Crisostomo has this thing of like, hey, median demo time. If it's more than like 30 minutes, it's great. If it's more than 65, it's like you're golden. Go for things like that. Have that validation in advance. Have evidence. Don't just have the game. Have wishlist. Have followers. Have Discord people. Have people who've playtested your game, giving you feedback about it. If you'll be able to iterate upon, getting them as well, on top of having a good game and having a game that fits the market as well. Like, you could have the greatest game. If it was a 2D puzzle platformer, it's probably not going to show a lot of evidence that, hey, it's going to be successful and we should publish this. So that is part one. Then once you have that game that you are like pretty certain, like, hey, this can be funded. Like, this is what publishers want, which is already a tall task. I'm very much oversimplifying here. What do you do then? Well, you start the conversations with publishers, and you have that like 0.1% of pitches get accepted thing. This is an important one to keep in mind if you have runway. If you are not someone who's like, oh, I've started working on this on the side, but I actually need money like sooner rather than later. Because this is something else that the indie publishing landscape has changed in a lot. How? The time between getting your first pitch meeting and like having the contract and seeing the money in your bank account. This used to be, if you were lucky, about a month. If you were unlucky, like 3 months. And it was like, hey, if the publishers were down, they do 3 months and they do some due diligence and that's it. Or like, that's not it, but 3 months, it's acceptable. Especially 1 month, it's like, hey, if I can get funding for my game, it's worth a month of effort. Problem is, as part of that evidence, it's not just evidence that comes from you. The publisher will do what they call due diligence. They'll look at their own market research. They'll be like, hey, is this pitch deck just bamboozling us, or does this developer know what he's talking about? How much risk is there for us? Are we going to get our investment back, yes or no? And because they are putting more scrutiny, so to say, in that validation, you get the problem now where a quick timeline is 3 months between your original pitch and you get the money in your bank account. If you're unlucky, it's 6 months. So in our case, for example, Guild Architect, we want to release it in Q2 2025. Yeah. The problem is we're now basically September, almost. If you take 6 months for that, because from pitching to getting signed, let's say worst case, we basically get the money when we were planning to release the game. So those are also things that you need to keep in mind with your pitch decks and things like that. Everything gets slower, and you need to keep that in mind as well. If you have only 2 months of runway and you're like panic messaging publishers, you're probably toast. If you have 6 months of runway, okay, you're doing better. Right now is the point to really, if you need the money and you don't see another way, start messaging publishers now. I can't guarantee that it's gonna happen, but at least if a publisher is like, hey, this is a good idea and we do think there's evidence and we do want to fund it, then you don't have the problem of, I'm not going to exist by the time the publisher signs the contract. That's another big downside that you don't want. So publishing, it's something that I am going to be learning a lot about this week. I think I told you that before already. If you are interested in publishing and I want to run my own studio, I want to find more ways of revenue and funding and all of that, I want to see how Bite Me Games is doing it, because we're like trying out everything basically, then I highly recommend going over to our Patreon. We post extra videos there every Monday, talking about, for example, our pitch deck for Guild Architect is the one that I uploaded today as well there. It's a very good video if you ask me. There's some things that maybe, are not going to be perfect yet, but it's going to give you more starting points. I've also talked to a lot of publishers before, not for pitching our games exactly, but just for learning what are they looking for. And I talk about it in there as well. I talk about the industry, and I talk about more things generally that don't really fit on this YouTube channel, because I need to be like following the algorithm and hyper edited videos and things like that. So if that's something that you're interested in, like I said, go to Patreon. Apart from that, I'm really curious, do you have any publisher-related questions? Because right now it's Monday. I think I'm going to be humbled, and I'm going to be learning a very high amount of things in the next few days when we're going to be meeting and pitching publishers as well. So if you have any questions that you think like, hey, could you maybe elaborate a bit more on what you would do in this case with publishing, for example, let me know in the comments down below. I'll try to answer them. If I don't have an answer immediately, you can always join our Discord or our Patreon, like I said, and I'll post updates there as well. So apart from that, this is kind of a bit of a weird video. I don't know how highly edited this is going to be, because once again, I'm just pumping out content for DevCon, Gamescom. It's going to be a very busy week, so you want to be subscribed because you'll get notified every time basically I upload, which is going to be basically daily, I think, at the current schedule I'm planning, so we'll see how it goes. Apart from that, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one. I can smell the sauerkraut and whatever, so I'm gonna go over there now. Anyways, Bye! So once again, coverage of DevCom has been brought to you by Rive. If you're looking for a beautiful and simple way to add vector menus to your game, there's no easier way than Rive. It's completely free to get started for indies. There's a link down below to get started. They also have a Discord, which I'll link down below, where you can also find more information about the product. I think it can be a great thing for making very pretty UIs and not just gray blobs on a screen. And also, once again, I just want to thank Rive because they've made this coverage and this video specifically possible because of that. So go and check them out, and thanks for watching.